I'm Jordan, head librarian by day and keeper of the city stories by night. On October 28th, I rolled a plastic cauldron through the stacks like a coronation. The budget read $742.16 for the party, $129 for the fog machine, $14 for cinnamon candles, $39 for orange twinkle lights, $88 for pumpkin cookies from the bakery, the rest for cider and paper bats. Every receipt slid into my ledger like a promise. This Halloween would be for the kids, for the teenagers who pretend not to care, for the elders who remember when stories mattered more than money. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Money. That word had started to haunt me. My sister's collection, first edition's marginalia like Constellation's hand-sewn spines, had been appraised at $6 million. $6 million. She'd told me once, over coffee on December 18th, that the books must belong to the readers, not a vault. Then she passed a march, and grief turned hours into syrup. Papers blurred. Parker, my nephew, the one who publishes glossy thrillers and talks like every room is a microphone, handled the will. "I'll keep everything tasteful, Uncle," he said. "A legacy deserves a stage." By October 29th, we had paper ravens suspended from fishing line over the reading room. Taylor, my grandson, 16 and nimble with tape, balanced on a ladder while I guided the ravens into flight. "Looks like they're guarding something," he said. "They are," I replied, and I wasn't talking about the cash box. At noon, Parker breezed in wearing a black turtleneck and a grin that could cut glass. He made a circuit through the stacks like a buyer inspecting cattle. "Big night on the 31st, I hear," he said, glancing at the bulletin board where I'd pinned the schedule. 5 o'clock storytelling, 6:30 costume parade, 7:15 cider toast. "Community night," I said, "like your aunt wanted." Parker clapped my shoulder. "About that, I've got some very exciting news. We finalized the transfer this morning. Her collection's moving to a private archive. Insurance alone is a beast, 2 policies, $12,000 a year. But it's handled." He winked. I negotiated a curator title for myself. My chest tightened. She told me the library. "Uncle," he said, sympathetic as a snake, "you misremember. The will leaves the collection to me. I'm in publishing. It's logical." He added, practically purring, "I'll explain at the party. People like a little spectacle." I watched him drift off toward the rare room door like he already owned the hinges. I remember the notary stamp on a copy he'd flashed in April, too quickly, and the way the ink bled at the edges. I wanted to believe in grief fog, in administrative mix-ups. But October does not forgive illusions. By evening, I was cataloging unease as if it were a misplaced volume. October 30th, rain rattled the skylight. Taylor, and I tested the fog machine near the circulation desk. "You're thinking hard," he said, reading my silence like a page. "I'm thinking your great aunt kept a diary," I murmured. "She wrote everything down. If there's a crack in that will, it's in her words. Where would it be?" Taylor asked. "She had a habit," I said. "Hollow books. She liked secrets that looked like stories." We began a quiet search. Between patron questions and phone calls about costume rules, no real blade, please, we tapped spines and opened suspiciously light volumes. In the craft corner, a book titled Autumn Preserves weighed almost nothing. Inside, empty pages. In the local history case, Pilgrim Roads was glued shut. "Smart," Taylor said. "Decoys." At 7:44 p.m., I felt the old librarian's instinct, an itch in the fingertips when truth is within reach. My sister had loved Edgar Allan Poe, but she always joked that The Raven was overquoted. She preferred the purloined letter. Hide the thing in plain sight. I turned to the display we'd made for the holiday, a line of battered classics on a tablecloth of midnight blue. The purloined letter sat dead center, too perfect, too theatrical. I lifted it. Heavy. Real pages. But something thudded in the back cover, a thin rectangle against cardboard. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Laughter. Parker's voice carried like a trumpet. "Wait till you hear what we've pulled off. Guests were early. The pre-party committee Allison from the council, Christian from the after-school program, Brooke and Peyton lugging pumpkin cartons. The library brightened. A chorus of hellos, the scent of cinnamon and wet umbrellas. "Grandpa," Taylor whispered, "eyes on the door, if he sees you with that." The latch clicked. Parker swept in behind the guests, glossy and confident, a paper in his hand that gleamed with a seal. He raised it as if it were a trophy. "Family, friends, before the festivities, a toast to legacy." I slid my thumb under the back cover flap of the purloined letter and felt adhesive give way. A small, cloth-bound notebook slid into my palm like a fish escaping a net. Then Parker's eyes locked on mine. He stopped mid-speech, smile knife in. "Uncle," he said softly, too softly for the guests, "what exactly is that in your hand?" I looked down. The cloth was unmistakable, my sister's favorite indigo. Across the front, in her looping script, December 24th, for those who love books more than banks. Everyone. Parker called, louder now, voice bright as shattered glass. "Jordan has an announcement." And as every face turned toward me, the library lights flickered, then went out. The darkness lasted maybe 10 seconds, just enough for conversations to hush and for the smell of warm cider to sharpen in the air. When the lights blinked back, Parker was still staring at me, his fake smile locked in place. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, a flash of unease, like he knew the party wasn't going to be a stage after all. I slipped the indigo diary into the inner pocket of my cardigan before anyone else noticed. Taylor was already moving toward the snack table, pretending to refill the cookies, giving me a cover. "All right," Parker announced, his voice rising above the clink of mugs. "As I was saying, this Halloween marks a new chapter in honoring my dear aunt's legacy." He raised his paper like a magician about to pull a rabbit from a hat. From across the room, Allison, who'd known my sister since grade school, asked, "What's that?" "Some kind of announcement." "Exactly," Parker said, straightening his turtleneck. "The collection is being relocated to ensure its preservation. It's what she would have wanted." My jaw tightened. She had wanted the opposite. And now I had the proof in my pocket. The diary's cover still radiated a faint scent of my sister's lavender lotion. I could almost hear her chuckle. "If anyone's reading this, it means the wrong hands have the key." I moved toward the back of the room, Taylor at my side. "We can't open this here," I whispered. "But if we don't, he'll walk out of here with his story locked in people's heads." Taylor replied, "And by morning it'll be too late." The fog machine hissed from the corner, sending a pale cloud curling across the carpet. Behind it, the children's puppet stage offered the only real privacy in the room. We ducked behind it, the curtain brushing my shoulders. I pulled the diary out, flipping to the ribbon marker. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, quick strokes, little stars in the margins when she was excited. October 24th. Parker's been pressing me to change the will, something about investors' preservation and a museum in his name. I refused, told him the books are for the library. He didn't take it well. My pulse quickened. A few pages later, December 2nd, found my will in the study with fresh ink on the signature page. Not my handwriting, not my pen. The sound of Parker's voice cut through the air again, louder now, as if to pull attention away from us. "I'll be arranging a small, private auction for select volumes." Taylor's eyes widened. "He's selling them?" Before I could answer, a shadow crossed the curtain. A man's voice, smooth, practiced, whispered, "You might want to hand that over, Uncle, for safekeeping." I looked up. Parker's polished shoes were inches from the hem of the fabric. Because, he continued, "You wouldn't want to get caught with stolen property, would you?" The fog thickened around us, and I realized half the room had gone quiet, waiting to see what would happen next. I stepped out from behind the puppet stage, the diary still in my hand. The room's eyes shifted between us like spectators at a prize fight. Taylor stayed behind the curtain, just far enough to be my shadow. "Stolen property?" I repeated, my voice calm but carrying. "Interesting choice of words, Parker, because I have a feeling you know a thing or two about theft." His smile didn't falter, but I saw his jaw tighten. "You're confused, Uncle. This is a party. Let's not make a scene." On the contrary, I said, a scene might be exactly what's needed. I held up the diary. Recognize this? Parker's gaze flicked to the indigo cover. He took a step forward, lowering his voice. Hand it to me now, and we can discuss this privately. Allison, bless her curiosity, piped up, is that your sister's handwriting? I opened to a random page and read aloud. Found my will in the study with fresh ink on the signature page. Not my handwriting. Not my pen. Gasps rippled through the room. That's... Parker started, but I cut him off. That's a diary entry dated December 2nd. I said, my sister knew you were pressuring her to change her will. She knew you were capable of forgery. And now you stood in front of friends and neighbors, bragging about finalizing a transfer that was never legal to begin with. His mask cracked, just for a second, but enough for Taylor to see. My grandson stepped out from behind the curtain, holding his phone. I recorded your little speech earlier, he said, and I've got a feeling the city council, the historical society, and the police will be interested. Parker's tone turned icy. You're making a mistake. You have no idea how contracts work, how wills work. I know how honesty works, I said, and how communities protect their own. The library was silent, except for the hiss of the fog machine, and the faint thump of the cider urn settling back on the counter. Brooke from the Historical Society spoke up, voice firm. If those books were promised to the library, they stay here. We'll get the legal paperwork moving Monday morning. I took a step closer to Parker, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Run if you want. But if you do, this diary goes straight to the police before you can pack your first box. He held my stare for a long, tense beat. Then, with a tight smile, he backed toward the door. Enjoy your party, Uncle. This isn't over. Oh, it's just getting started, I said. And as he disappeared into the night, Taylor whispered beside me, Grandpa, what if he comes back? I glanced at the diary, at the guests murmuring in shock, and at the shadowed library entrance. He will, I said, and when he does, we'll be ready. The guests didn't rush for the cider anymore. They clustered in uneasy groups, whispering about Parker, about the diary, about what this meant for the library. I stood at the circulation desk, the indigo book in front of me like a loaded weapon. Taylor leaned against the counter, eyes scanning the door. He's not just going to walk away, he said. You saw his face. I had, and he was right. Parker's retreat wasn't surrender. It was a recalculation. Men like him never let go willingly. They simply find another angle. Allison, I called, waving her over. Can you and Brooke keep the guests entertained? The parade starts in 20 minutes, and I don't want panic taking the spotlight. She nodded, though I saw the concern in her eyes. What are you going to do? Make sure he can't spin this before we do, I said. Taylor followed me to my office in the back. It wasn't much. 2 filing cabinets, a desk, and a wall of mismatched mugs from every library conference I'd ever attended. But the Wi-Fi was strong, and that was what mattered now. I set the diary on the desk and pulled out my phone. First call was to the Historical Society's lawyer. I gave him the short version. My sister's written intent, Parker's admission, the need for a legal freeze on collection until the matter was reviewed. If you can file an injunction first thing tomorrow, the books stay here, I said. Second call was to a friend at the local paper. I didn't give him every detail yet. Just enough to ensure that if Parker tried to hold a press conference in the morning, there'd be another narrative ready to meet it. Taylor scrolled through his phone. Grandpa, he's already posting, he said, showing me Parker's social media feed. A photo of him in the library earlier tonight. Captioned, honoring Aunt's legacy by placing her collection in professional care. That's not professional care, I said. That's laundering theft through a press release. I started scanning pages of the diary, uploading them to a secure folder. Every entry about the will, every mention of Parker's pressure, every suspicion she recorded. The more I read, the angrier I became. October 28th. He keeps talking about value, about rarity, about contacts overseas. I told him the books are worth more to the city than to any collector. He said, that depends on which city. A faint knock pulled us both out of our focus. Brooke stood in the doorway, her expression tense. "Jordan, there's someone outside asking for you." "Parker?" I asked. She shook her head. "A man in a dark suit. Says he's with the auction house in New York. Claims Parker sent him to secure the items." Taylor glanced at me. "Guess we don't have until Monday after all." I closed the diary and slid it into my satchel. "Then we deal with it tonight." The man in the suit stood just outside the library's glass doors, tall and thin, his umbrella dripping onto the welcome mat. His expression was polite, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the lobby like he was appraising it. "Jordan?" he asked as I approached. "My name's Eric Dalton. I'm here on behalf of Parker Sullivan. I've been authorized to take possession of the rare book collection this evening. I have the necessary documentation." He produced a sleek black folder, its pages perfectly dry despite the rain. Contracts, inventory lists, even what looked like shipping orders. I didn't reach for them. "The collection isn't leaving the library," I said. "I understand your hesitation," Eric replied smoothly, "but Mr. Sullivan is acting in accordance with his legal rights as the inheritor. The shipment is scheduled for early morning. I'm here to ensure it prepared for transport." Taylor had come up behind me, silent as a shadow. "And if those rights are contested?" he asked. Eric gave him the kind of smile you use on a child who's spoken out of turn. "Then the courts will decide. But tonight, my job is to secure the materials before any complications arise." The way he said complications told me exactly what Parker feared, that the diary in my satchel would burn his plans to the ground. "I'll make this simple," I said, stepping closer. "You're not taking anything. The collection is under review by the Historical Society, and I've already begun filing for a legal hold." Eric's polite mask slipped just for a moment. "Mr. Sullivan anticipated resistance," he said. "He suggested you might be emotional about the matter. I can assure you, I'm here to keep things professional." "I can assure you," I said, "professionalism includes leaving before I call the police." For a long second, neither of us moved. Then Eric tucked the folder back under his arm and gave me a faint nod. "Very well. I'll report back to Mr. Sullivan, but this isn't over." "I've heard that before tonight," I replied. He turned and walked into the rain, his figure swallowed by the dark street. Taylor exhaled. "Grandpa," he's going to warn Parker. "You know what that means." I did. Parker would move faster now, maybe even tonight. And with the city's Halloween parade tomorrow, the library would be full of people, noise, and easy cover for someone who wanted to slip in unnoticed. I looked at the locked door to the rare book room and tightened my grip on the satchel. "It means," I said, "we set a trap before he does." Taylor's eyes lit up at the word trap. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I motioned for him to follow me into the rare book room. The heavy door groaned as I unlocked it, and a familiar scent of leather, paper, and time-worn wood spilled out. The collection glowed under low amber lights, each glass case like a treasure chest. If Parker wants to grab something before the injunction hits, he'll come for the most valuable pieces first, I said. The illuminated manuscripts, the first editions, the ones worth enough to make the risk worthwhile. Taylor walked past a display of early American poetry, his reflection warping in the curved glass. "So we move them?" I shook my head. "No. If we hide them, he'll know they're missing. But if we can make it look like they're untouched while marking them in a way only we can track, we can catch him in the act." I pulled a small blacklight pen from my desk drawer. It had been a gift from a preservation workshop years ago, meant for cataloging without visible marks. "Invisible under normal light," I said, uncapping it, "but under UV, clear as day." One by one, we worked our way through the cases, adding a tiny dot to the back corner of each book Parker might target. Taylor handled the pen while I recorded the titles and their exact placement in my ledger. If even one was missing or moved tomorrow, we'd know instantly. When we finished, I turned to the display near the door, my sister's favorite shelf, filled with Gothic novels and detective fiction. "She would have liked this," I murmured, "a mystery solved with a trick of the light." Taylor smiled faintly. "She would have loved it, and she'd want you to win." We locked the room and left the lights on low, just enough to make it look undisturbed. Back in my office, I slipped the UV flashlight into my pocket. "Tomorrow night," I said, You keep your phone ready. If Parker or anyone else touches those cases, you record it. Taylor nodded. And if he tries something before the party? Then, I said, glancing toward the front doors, he'll find out just how stubborn a librarian can be. The rain outside had stopped, but the street felt too quiet. I checked the locks twice before heading home. Still, as I walked through the empty lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had already been here. And when I reached the door, I saw it. Just a faint smear on the glass at shoulder height, the kind you leave pressing your hand against it to peer inside. The smear on the glass wasn't from a child or a casual passerby. It was too high, too deliberate. I leaned closer and saw the faint imprint of fingertips. Whoever it was had been watching. Taylor noticed my expression as he came up behind me. "What is it?" "Someone was here," I said. "Recently." We stepped outside. The rain-slicked street reflected the library's lights in broken shards, but the sidewalk was empty. Still, there were footprints, 3 clear impressions leading toward the corner before vanishing into the darkness. Men's dress shoes. Taylor frowned. "Eric, or Parker himself," I said. "Either way, they're scouting." Back inside, I reset the alarm system and checked the locks again. My gut told me tonight wasn't over. We decided to split up. Taylor would stay in the children's section with his laptop, where he had a clear view of the main floor cameras, while I stayed near the rare book room. The library was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. Around midnight, the security monitor flickered. One of the exterior cameras caught movement, just a shadow at the far end of the alley. Then another shape joined it. 2 figures, standing close, talking. Taylor's voice crackled softly through the walkie. "They're here." I grabbed a UV flashlight and headed for the lobby, keeping low. Through the narrow pane beside the main door, I saw them. One I recognized instantly, Parker in his black turtleneck. The other man wore a baseball cap pulled low. He held something long and thin in his hand, metal, glinting under the streetlight. They weren't looking at the door. They were looking past it, straight toward the rare book room. Then Parker glanced down, speaking into a phone. And in that moment, the second man turned his head just enough for me to see his face. It wasn't Eric. It was a locksmith who'd changed the rare room's lock 3 months ago. And in his other hand, I now saw, was the key. My pulse quickened. That key was supposed to be in the library safe, untouched since the lock change. If the locksmith had it, it meant Parker planned this for weeks, maybe months. Taylor's whisper came through the walkie. "They're moving." I backed away from the door, slipping into the shadow of the magazine racks. The front lock rattled softly, then stopped. They weren't coming through the main entrance. They were going around. The rare book room had its own service door that opened to the alley. It was meant for moving large items without disturbing the main floor. My sister had fought to keep it for emergencies. I ran, keeping low, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. Halfway there, the overhead lights flickered and went out. Not a city outage. Someone had killed the breaker. The library was swallowed in darkness. Only the dim glow from the exit signs painted the shelves an eerie red. I could hear them now. Low voices, the creak of hinges, the faint click of the lock turning. My hand tightened around the UV flashlight. I reached the corner just as the rare room door swung open. A thin beam of light from Parker's phone swept across the glass cases. "Quickly," he whispered. "The illuminated folio first." The locksmith moved with purpose, unlocking the nearest case. The sound of the hinge lifting was like a gunshot in the silence. I stepped forward, ready to confront them, then froze. There was another shadow in the room, one neither of them seemed to notice. Tall, still, standing in the far corner near the Poe display. It didn't move, didn't speak. But in the faint spill of light, I could see the glint of metal in its hand. Not a tool, a knife for a heartbeat. I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Shadows can do strange things in half-light. But then the figure shifted, the blade catching a sharp glint from Parker's phone. Neither Parker nor the locksmith had seen him. They were too focused on a glass case, too greedy to notice the danger standing just a few feet away. I stepped fully into the doorway. "Parker," I said, my voice low but firm. He jerked around, startled, his phone beam swinging toward me. Uncle. That's when the stranger moved. One smooth step out of the shadows, knife angled low. Parker saw him now. His breath caught, his hand fumbling for the nearest book like to shield him. The locksmith backed away, eyes darting between the three of us. What is this? He muttered. The knife man didn't answer. He just kept advancing, slow and deliberate, his gaze locked on Parker. Who are you? I demanded. Insurance, the man said finally, his voice a gravel whisper. My employer doesn't like unpaid debts. Parker's face drained of color. I told you, I just need more time. Time's up. He lunged forward. Instinct took over. I grabbed the nearest metal bookend from the display table and hurled it. It clanged against the glass case, startling him just enough for Parker to stumble back. The locksmith bolted for the service door. Parker tried to follow, but the stranger blocked him, blade raised. Somewhere behind me, I heard Taylor's footsteps pounding closer. Then the stranger's eyes flicked toward me. For the first time, his expression shifted, recognition. Jordan, he said, like he knew me, you shouldn't be here. And before I could react, he reached into his coat with his free hand and pulled out something small, black, and humming faintly, before tossing it onto the floor at my feet. The device landed with a dull clatter, rolling once before settling against my shoe. The faint humming grew sharper, vibrating through the floorboards. Don't touch it, the knife man warned, his eyes flicking back to Parker. But I knew enough from a lifetime of mystery novels and preservation workshops. Anything humming like that inside a library was bad news. It wasn't a bomb, though. The casing was too small, too smooth. Then I caught the faint blinking light and realized what it was, a portable signal jammer. Within seconds, my phone went dark. No bars. No Wi-Fi. Taylor's voice crackled over the walkie, then cut off entirely. The man smiled faintly, like he knew I'd figured it out. No calls. No recordings. Just us. Parker tried to edge toward the service door again, but the stranger herded him back with a flick of the knife. You've been hiding something, he said. I want it. Now. I don't have it. Parker snapped, though the panic in his voice betrayed him. I realized with a cold jolt he wasn't talking about the books. Whatever this man wanted, it was something else Parker had taken or promised, and failed to deliver. The hum of the jammer was almost hypnotic. I forced myself to focus, glancing toward the table where the illuminated folio lay. My UV flashlight was still in my pocket. If I could distract him, maybe Taylor could slip in unnoticed. Then, from somewhere in the darkened hallway, a faint creak of floorboards. The stranger's head turned sharply toward the sound. Taylor. The man's grip on the knife tightened. And in that moment, the humming stopped. Not because the jammer was off, because every light in the rare book room blazed alive at once, flooding us in white. The sudden brightness revealed a fourth figure standing in the doorway behind me, broad-shouldered, wearing a city police badge. And his hand wasn't on a gun. It was reaching for the diary in my satchel. I turned so fast my satchel strap bit into my shoulder. The officer's eyes were fixed on the indigo diary like it was evidence in a high-profile case. And maybe, in his mind, it was, Officer? I began, trying to place his face. I'd seen him around town before, mostly directing traffic during parades, never in the library. Hand it over, Mr. Jordan, he said, his voice calm, almost casual, for safekeeping. Behind me, Parker seized a moment. Yes, exactly. Keep it in official custody until the legal matters are sorted. His tone was syrup-sweet, but I caught the edge underneath. The knife man let out a short, humorless laugh. You think he's here for you? Think again. The officer's gaze didn't waver. Sir, the diary. I didn't move. Every instinct screamed that if I let out my hands now, it would vanish into some back channel, where neither the library, the historical society, nor I would ever see it again. Taylor's voice came from the hallway, low but urgent. Grandpa, don't. The officer took a step closer, hand now resting on his belt. Not the holster, but the radio. We can do this the easy way, or I can call for backup. Call them, I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. Something shifted in his expression. Annoyance, maybe even surprise. That's a mistake, he said. In the corner of my eye, the knife man moved closer to Parker, blade still low. The tension in the room was like a taut rope ready to snap. And then the sound hit us. 3 hard bangs on the library's main door, echoing through the building. Everyone froze. A voice shouted from outside, muffled but forceful. "Jordan, it's Brooke. Open up." The officer glanced toward the sound, then back at me. "Don't," he said quietly. Taylor stepped into the doorway between us. Shoulders squared. "If you want it, you'll have to go through both of us." The officer's eyes narrowed. His hand shifted, not toward the radio this time, but toward something inside his jacket. And in that split second, Parker made his move, lunging straight for my satchel. Parker's fingers hooked the strap, yanking hard. The satchel slammed against my ribs, and for a moment I lost my balance. Taylor grabbed Parker's arm, trying to pull him back, but Parker twisted like a cornered animal. The knife man barked, "Don't drop it." And I realized with a jolt he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to Parker. The officer stepped forward, one hand diving inside his jacket. The tension in the room snapped. I drove my elbow into Parker's chest, forcing him back a step, and wrenched the satchel free. Taylor moved between us like a shield. From outside, Brooke was still pounding at the front door. "Jordan, let me in, now." The officer's voice cut through. "Enough. Hand me the diary, and this ends here." "That's the problem," I said. "If you get it, it never ends here." The knife man's patience broke. He shoved Parker toward the service door. "Change of plan, we take both. Him and the diary." Parker stumbled, caught himself, and for a moment our eyes locked. He wasn't smug anymore. He looked genuinely afraid. Whatever game he'd been playing, this was beyond it now. Then the officer made his move. With surprising speed for a man his size, he lunged at me, fingers grazing the flap of the satchel. I spun away, my shoulder hitting the edge of the glass case. Something inside shifted, and I heard the faint scrape of leather on wood. Under the harsh white lights, I saw it, one of the marked books from my UV list lying slightly out of place. The illuminated folio. Taylor saw it too. His eyes widened. "Grandpa, it's gone." I turned fully, scanning the room. The folio's glass case was empty. The knife man was gone, and the service door was swinging slowly shut. I bolted for the service door, catching it just before the latch clicked. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pavement and exhaust. The alley beyond was empty. No footsteps, no voices, just a distant hum of traffic. Taylor came up behind me, breathless. "He's gone. How could he be gone? That alley's a dead end." I knew he was right. The far end was blocked by a brick wall, and the lock gate to the loading dock. Unless the knife man had wings, he couldn't have vanished that fast. Unless... I grabbed the flashlight from my pocket and swept the beam across the wet asphalt. Footprints. Clear, deep, heading toward the brick wall, and stopping right in front of the dumpster. Taylor frowned. He didn't climb it. The lid's dry. No scuff marks. "Then there's another way out," I said. I crouched, checking behind the dumpster. There was an old maintenance hatch, half hidden under peeling paint. The kind the city had probably forgotten about decades ago. "He planned this," Taylor whispered. We stepped back inside, locking the service door tight. Parker was still there, slumped against the wall, rubbing his arm where I'd shoved him. The officer stood near the display table, watching me with unreadable eyes. "Where is he?" the officer asked. "Gone," I said shortly, and he took the folio. Parker straightened, his voice sharp. "You don't understand. If he's got it, this isn't just about the books anymore." I stepped closer. "Then enlighten me, Parker. What does he want?" He hesitated, glancing at the officer. "I can't say here." The officer's tone hardened. "You'll say now." Parker's jaw tightened, then he shook his head. "You think he's after the folio for its appraised value? That's pocket change to the people he works for. There's something inside it." The words hit me like a cold wave. My sister's folio was famous for its craftsmanship, but if Parker was telling the truth, she'd hidden something in it, just like the diary. "What is it?" I pressed. Parker hesitated, then said, "A document, handwritten, worth more than the entire collection combined." Taylor looked between us. "Then if he gets it out of town." "He won't," I said, but my voice fell hollow. Before anyone could speak again, Brooke's voice rang out from the front hall. "Jordan, you need to see this." We followed her to the glass doors. Outside, parked under the streetlight, was a black van with its engine idling. The side door slid open just enough for me to glimpse the edge of a wooden crate inside, large enough to hold the folio. And standing beside it, silhouetted in the light, was a knife man. He was holding the folio in one hand, and in the other my sister's diary. The sight of that diary in his hand hit harder than the cold October air leaking through the doorframe. My grip tightened on the handle, every instinct screaming to run out there and rip it from him. But the knife man didn't look like someone you approach head-on, not with that calm, deliberate way he stood, as if every move was already planned. The van's engine rumbled, low and steady. Taylor moved to my side. "Grandpa, how did he get the diary?" "You had it." I checked my satchel. Empty. The flap hung open just enough to tell me the truth. Somewhere between chasing him through the service door and locking it behind me, he'd taken it right off me without my noticing. Brooke's voice was tight. "If he's got both, he's leaving tonight." The knife man tilted his head, meeting my gaze through the glass. Then, slowly, he opened the folio, not to its printed pages, but to the inside of the leather cover. From where I stood, I could just make out a small, sealed envelope tucked into a slit in the binding. He tapped it with his knife, almost like a taunt. Parker cursed under his breath. "That's it. That's what he's after." The officer's voice was low. "What's in it?" "A letter," Parker said, "from an estate that hasn't been made public. It's not about books. It's about ownership of land. Prime land." My mind reeled. If my sister had hidden that letter, she'd done it for a reason. Maybe she'd meant to give it to the library. Maybe to keep it out of Parker's hands entirely. Either way, if the knife man left with it, both the books and whatever leverage the letter held were gone forever. The van side door slid open wider. Another man inside reached out, ready to take the folio. I turned to the officer. "If you're really here to secure things, now's your chance." "Stop him." But the officer didn't move. He just watched, his expression unreadable. Taylor noticed. "You're not going to stop him, are you?" The officer's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is bigger than you realize." Before I could respond, the knife man closed the folio and stepped into the van. The door began to slide shut. I slammed my palm against the glass door handle. And that's when every light in the library went out again. From the darkness behind us came the sound of another door unlocking. The sudden blackness swallowed the streetlight's glow, leaving only the faint rumble of the van's engine outside. I froze, my hand still on the door handle. Behind me, the soft click of a latch turning echoed through the library. Taylor's whisper was sharp. That came from the archives room. Brooke fumbled for her phone flashlight, but the officer's voice cut through the dark. "Don't." Something in his tone made my stomach knot. He knew exactly who had just come in. A beam of light flared from the back hallway. A second figure emerged, silhouetted against the glow, a broad man in work overalls, the kind our maintenance staff wore. But no one from maintenance would be here at midnight on Halloween weekend. In his hands was a wheeled cart. On it, stacked in neat rows, were half a dozen more rare volumes, ones I hadn't even marked. He pushed it forward with slow, deliberate steps, heading straight for the front door. Parker's voice cracked. "You can't, those aren't." The man didn't even glance at him. Instead, he looked at the officer, as if awaiting silent approval. The officer gave the faintest nod. It hit me like ice water. The officer wasn't just here for the diary. He was part of this entire operation. Knife man outside, muscle inside, and a badge in between to keep anyone from interfering. I stepped in front of the cart. Not one of those leave this building. The man stopped, the cart inches from my knees. He didn't speak, just reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, tossing it onto the top book. Taylor snatched it up and aimed his phone light at it. 3 words were scrawled in heavy ink. Last warning. Move. Behind me, the van outside revved louder. The side door slammed shut. They're leaving, Brooke hissed. But before I could turn toward the glass doors, the man with the cart shifted suddenly, his massive hand clamping down on my shoulder with crushing force. In the same moment, from somewhere outside came the sharp pop of a tire exploding, followed by the screech of the van swerving. And then silence. The silence after the van's screech was thick enough to hear my own pulse. The man's grip on my shoulder was like a vice, but his attention shifted toward the sound outside. Taylor acted first. With a sharp shove, he knocked the man's arm away from me and kicked the cart hard. It rolled backward, books tumbling to the floor with a sound that made my librarian's heart ache. But in that chaos, I broke free. We rushed to the front door. Outside, under the cold glow of the streetlight, the black van sat sideways across the street, its front tire shredded. The driver's door hung open. The knife man was gone. So was the diary. But the folio lay in the middle of the crosswalk, its leather cover wet from the drizzle. I ran toward it, every nerve on fire, expecting at any moment to feel the sting of a blade in my back. No one stopped me. No one moved. The night had gone eerily still. I scooped it up, feeling the weight of centuries in my hands. The envelope inside was still there, untouched. I tucked it into my coat before turning back toward the library. That's when Parker stumbled out of the shadows, his turtleneck torn, his face pale. "He's not working alone," he said, voice shaking. "There's another group, they'll come for it." Brooke had caught up, her eyes wide as she saw the folio in my hands. "Jordan, we need to call the council, the Historical Society, now." The officer appeared in the doorway, his face unreadable. "You're not keeping that," he said. I met his gaze, something inside me hardening like stone. "You don't get to decide that. Neither does Parker. My sister made her wishes clear." I reached into my coat and pulled out the diary I'd hidden in my inner lining, a second copy she'd made, one Parker never knew about. The officer's expression flickered for the first time. "This," I said, holding it high, "is already scanned, copied, and stored off-site. Every word about the will, every note about Parker, every line about that letter. If anything happens to me, it goes public." For the first time all night, the officer stepped back. Taylor came to my side. "Grandpa, what about the letter?" I opened the folio and carefully slid the envelope free. My sister's handwriting curled across the front. For Jordan. Trust no one else. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, fragile but still legible. It was a land grant, prime coastal property deeded to the city over a century ago, now worth tens of millions. And here in my hands was the legal proof the library, not Parker, not some faceless collector, was the rightful steward. I looked at Parker. He didn't speak. There was nothing left for him to say. By the time the police chief arrived, someone I actually trusted, the officer was gone. So was the man with the cart. And the knife man, he'd melted into the night like a ghost. But the folio, the diary, and the letter were safe. For now. Halloween night still went on. The kids paraded through the stacks in their costumes, cider steaming in paper cups, laughter echoing off the walls. No one but us knew how close the library had come to losing its soul. As the last guest left and Taylor helped me gather the decorations, I stood in the rare book room. The folio back in its glass case, the UV dots still glowing faintly under my light. I whispered to the shelves, to my sister's memory, "It's yours. Always." Taylor looked at me. "Think they'll try again?" I smiled faintly. "Probably. But now they know I'll be here waiting." Outside, the fog rolled low over the street, curling like smoke around the lampposts. Somewhere in it, I thought I saw the shape of a man watching. If he was waiting for me to be afraid, he'd be waiting a long time, because this library was mine to protect. And I'd already proved what happened to anyone who tried to take it away. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, Click on the box on the right.